my like first rule of thumb is don't talk or ask a question and then just shut up.
All right, so I sat down with my buddy Mark Pasternack to ask him about pitching clients because this is something that he does extremely well, something that I've even asked for his own advice on how to do this even better within my own business. He's somebody that's been doing this well for years, probably 10 plus years, and he's really got it dialed in and has been making six figures for quite a while now. And I know money is definitely not everything, but since he's been making six figures plus, doing really well, that is just a note that he knows how to pitch, he knows how to approach clients and get them to understand how much it takes to do quality video production. So this is just a full-length conversation with him, asking him about do's and don'ts of pitching, his process, his insights. And yeah, I just hope that this brings value to you and that you enjoy it. So take a listen to the conversation. Let's talk about like do's and don'ts within pitching, because I feel like that's a big thing. Okay, I've arrived at the point where maybe I have a meeting, I have the opportunity. I was just coaching somebody the other day here locally who's like almost 10 years behind me and helping him through that process as well. But what are like, once you finally have the opportunity, you've got somebody's attention, what are kind of the do's and then the don'ts of the pitching process?
Oh man, I can't wait to hear yours. I mean, I don't know, but my like first rule of thumb is don't talk or ask a question and then just shut up.
Yeah.
Like just listen. I'm like, I try to talk maybe 20% of the time if I'm like really passionate. If not, the less you talk, the smarter you're going to appear. Like if you can just have a list of like 5 questions that'll help you figure out what you need to know in their business, ask them a question and just sit back. I mean, take notes if you want to take notes. But like, it's their business. And I think now, I don't know, I'm on sales calls trying to find the right software to use for this thing or use for that thing. And like, or like HR software right now. I just had a call last week and this person just talked the whole time. And it just made me feel like either you didn't do your research on my company or like you don't actually care about my situation. So don't overtalk is my number one rule. That's the don't. The do is to listen to what they have to say and acknowledge them. Don't just go off of like a downloaded sales template or sales script.
Right.
Like it's just like interviewing, like you have your questions when you're making a video. But based on their responses, you're going to adjust the next question, right? One other do, and then I want to hear yours. But like one other do that I learned, probably during COVID when I had nothing else to do, I downloaded or signed up for Masterclass and watched Chris Voss's Masterclass, FBI Negotiator.
Amazing.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, I took so many. It's not even a sales course, but it's all about human connection at the end of the day. And 2 techniques that he brought up, essentially repeating the last few words of somebody's sentence, because what that does is it makes them feel really acknowledged, right? Like you're just asking me about do's and don'ts and you're like, oh, that's a great question about do's and don'ts, Trent. Boom. All of a sudden you're like, oh, he heard me. So just you repeat that and then you can, answer the question. And then the other one is mirroring. So like body language, right? So like if they're talking with their hands, you can talk with their hands. Now it's not about being fake. That's if you're trying to fake it, it's going to come across as such. But it's just like 2 very practical ways for me as somebody with like a lot of ADHD and a hard time remembering, what do I say here? What do I say there? It's like, oh, this can help me just relate to them as a human being first, because you're not selling to a company, like you're selling to a person.
Yeah. I would say that was some of the exact advice I gave to this 20-year-old was go into this meeting and just ask very few questions and just ask leading questions that are going to allow the person to just share everything that they can. Because the reality is like you need to get them to come to their own conclusion versus you getting them to come to a conclusion. That's the
Yes.
difference. Is if they come
Mm,
to their own conclusion,
mm.
then they will own it and they will be willing to pay for it. But if you try and get them to get to a specific conclusion of what they need, it's going to be a lot more difficult to convince them that they need it because it's not going to feel owned like they own it, you know?
That's some
So yeah,
like reverse psychology right there, but it's
yeah.
true.
I mean, it's
Absolutely.
you've got to just ask them questions, and if somebody is inviting you to a meeting, they're willing to sit down and have a meeting, or even it's a phone meeting, then to some degree they're ready to commit to something. You know, it may not be a lot, it may not be everything that you hope for and expected, but if somebody's willing to have a meeting, they're at some degree you're ready to commit to something, and that's where you, like I said, you don't need to make them commit to what you want to do. You just need to ask them questions to figure out, like, for them to kind of pull the lid off the box and really determine what all the problems that they're experiencing within their sales or within their marketing or within their branding, and then how you can fit into there to help them alleviate those issues.
Can I
You
add one
know?
more real
Yep.
quick?
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask them questions that you can find out on Google. It's like one of my biggest pet peeves if I get on a sales call, like I'm trying to buy something, right? And they ask me all these questions, and I'm like, you clearly didn't do your research and you didn't go to my website. Like, I don't want to spend a half an hour or an hour repeating information that you could have found somewhere else. So I think like the do is do your research
Mm-hmm.
before you have that meeting so that you can come up with like what you said, leading questions, but like strategically leading questions that you can't find just on their website.
Yeah, and I've found myself in several meetings where the potential client asks, "Hey, did you take a look at our website?" And if you can't answer that truthfully saying yes, then that's a problem, you know? And like that should make you feel uncomfortable for a reason because like you said, going into that meeting, your answer should always to that question should always be yes, I've looked at your website. I know what all services you offer, what products you offer, what locations you have. Those kinds of things you need to be read up on. And if you can't remember all that, put it in a notebook and bring the notebook with you, you know, so that you can easily just look down and refer to that as you're communicating with the client. And that's going to show them if you can be like, speak to, well, I know you provide, you're talking about this service. I know you also provide this service. Could we help provide some clarity? If you start describing in detail, like what they do and pointing to specific things, they're going to take you way more serious.
Yeah, like here's a quick like setup example, right? Like say they're a grocery store,
Mm,
right? And you go, they're like a specialty health grocery store. And you can see all their products, kind of like their vibe, what their mission is. Instead of going in there and like, oh, what are the products that you offer? It's like, well, they're on the website. You can go look. But you could just saying. But like, because I always like to play devil's advocate with myself before I go into a sales meeting. Like, what are the negative things that they might say or ask? And then
mm,
how can I overcome them? You know, so instead you can go into that meeting and be like, hey, what are the top like 3 highest grossing products that you sell? And they can tell you. And they can be like, have you ever thought about making video content around those products? Because those are the ones you're selling most often and probably have the highest profit margins on.
yeah.
And then they're
Mm.
like, oh, I never thought about it like that before. So
Yeah. And
just
you're
like,
really,
yeah,
then you're asking more specific questions.
exactly.
I would say if you're looking for like a question to get started in that initial meeting, is to simply ask them if this hasn't already been covered in like pre-meeting emails or phone calls, texts, whatever. Ask them just like, why are you interested in video? You know, because that's going to open them up to, then they're going to tell you a problem. They're either going to say, well, we have trouble selling to, you know, to these organizations, or these consumers don't know anything about this service that we have because we've never really talked about it, you know, or, you know, our market is saturated and we want to stand out. That's branding. So if you just ask them, you're coming to them offering them video, but if they haven't told you, you need to ask them, why are you interested in video? And once the problems come up, then you start asking them questions about the problems. Like, okay, you want to do some branding videos. What should that look like? What is your brand? What separates you from others, and let them go into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a golden nugget. If you don't take away anything from this, that's exactly what you need to take away. Like, try to, just like what you said earlier, Trent, I forget how you phrased it, but like, essentially try to talk them out of video so that they convince themselves that they need video more than you're pitching it to them, because you're providing a very valuable service, right? So like, you don't need to convince yourself of that.
Yeah.
And sure, you can convince them, but yeah, go for it.
It's like the difference between going in and saying, so you want video for these products and these services, versus going in and saying, why do you want video?
Because where do you think video is going to impact your business?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you tell me. I'm like, okay, great. Here's my thought. Here's my plan,
Yeah. It's just like if I go to like a car dealership and they start pushing vehicles on me, versus if I walk in and they're like, you have a family? Are you looking for a bigger vehicle? Are you looking for a sports car? Are you looking to go fast? Are you looking to, go electric? But if they just start shoving vehicles on me, then it's like, whoa, it's your agenda, not my agenda. But if they start asking questions, then it's about my agenda, not their agenda.